If life is marked by varying degrees of cruelty, and if only monsters play God, and if God is in fact the creator of all life, does that make God a monster?
First and foremost, let's take a minute to admire the beauty that is this poster. Like, that's bloody gorgeous, no? Oh my god, speaking of God, that's bloody gorgeous!
Okay, let's start by saying I am, new to, film analysis. Well, not new, I've just never done a video on it. But I have seen, I have thoughts about the new Frankenstein, first of all. And I have seen, 5 videos to date alone on my For You critiquing this film, and, 4 out of the 5 were pretty negative, and I disagree with most of them. But I want to say why. And I would even argue that, kind of negative is an understatement. These critiques were actually kind of harsh in a way, and, I even read a review online that basically called the film childish. Not basically, literally that was in the title. Let's discuss. And it was fun writing, a little script for this. And yes, I did write a little script for this. I mean, blame it on the scholar in me. Now, the criticism that I've seen concerning this film can all be encapsulated in 4 main points. First, I've seen that it's surface level and not an accurate adaptation. Second, I've seen that, reading my script, it focuses too heavily on daddy issues with no societal or very little societal commentary. Third, I've seen that the relationship between the creature and Elizabeth was made into more of a romance. And fourth, I've seen that there will be spoilers. There will be spoilers. So save this video and come back after you've watched the movie if you have not, if you don't want spoilers, because there will be spoilers. And yeah, save it, because you're going to want to watch this. You know you want to watch this. Fourth, I've seen that the forgiveness at the end of the film was very unearned. Let's discuss. Also, I'd like to say that my opinions on this are just my opinions on this. They do not negate somebody else's or mean that, I'm right and they're wrong. Come on, we all know this already. First critique, surface level and inaccurate adaptation. I would like to say that adaptations are not direct or exact retellings. They are, and I feel this is obviously common knowledge, but I need to help everyone understand. Adaptations are not direct retellings. They're supposed to be they're supposed to offer a new point of view, a new perspective, a new thematic lens, something like that. Something is different, something is new, something is changed. Even if it is the same story, something is changed. Now, I have seen that the inaccurate adaptation is mostly concerned with the way the death of Elizabeth played out. And while I understand, I do want to say, I'll get into this later, but I do want to say I like the way it was changed. Boom. Now, concerning the critiques that I've seen so far of it being the surface level exploration of Mary Shelley's work, I think people were looking for another exploration of the themes that she explored, which is someone monstrous because they're this grotesque outsider, or is someone monstrous based on how harshly they treat this grotesque outsider? And I feel the idea of the outsider has been for the last Mary Shelley's work is very old. It's 180 probably older years old. The idea of this outsider has been done and done and done again. It's been explored. Guillermo del Toro was exploring something different. Guillermo del Toro took her story of this man who does these monstrous things, and he put it, I think he's looking at it through a very Catholic lens. Because you have to understand, he's a Mexican man. He grew up very Catholic. And he's looking at, the idea of Frankenstein through not only a Catholic lens, but a very paternal, maternal, and forgiving lens. Boom. I feel he's asking the question, not what makes someone monstrous, but he's more so concerned with the idea or the question that is creation in of itself monstrous? Is it an evil act? Now, am I coming from a place of defense? No. But am I coming from defense for Guillermo? No. But am I a stand of his? Yes. Pan's Labyrinth, you will always be famous. But I do think that in order to fully understand where what he was doing basically is to understand that he doesn't do horror that's supposed to scare you. He does horror that's more so haunting. And his horror, while it's grotesque or creepy looking, is more so drama with the horror costume on it. And I think you have to keep that in mind when you're watching his movies. And maybe that's just a tangent that has nothing to do with what anybody else was saying. But keep it in mind. On to the second point of criticism that I've seen or heard on other people's critiques is that this movie was overly focused on daddy issues and didn't have a lot or much societal or social commentary. This I completely disagree with. First, parenthood, be it motherhood or fatherhood, whether we like it, that and generational trauma, while a personal thing for each individual who is a parent and each child who is raised by their parents, that's a personal individual thing. It is also a very political thing, especially nowadays. In the past, people were basically having children was what you're supposed to do. Nowadays, you can pick other things with your life. You don't have to be a parent, especially in terms of being a mother. That's not, while there's still societal pressures to do it, it's not you better be a mama girl. You better get married and have that kid. That's not, anymore. And I think this leads directly into the third point of the idea that the monster and Elizabeth were made into this romance. And I feel there's a sub-point to add into that. I read the romance that other people are seeing, which I can see. Don't get me wrong. There were long stares and, him holding her after she was papawed. There were romantic undertones. And I guess you can read it that way. But I saw it more as a maternal thing. And I saw it as a juxtaposition to his relationship with Victor Frankenstein. And I think it was exploring a theme that is, or an idea that is very old, but still has ripples through today's society. And we all know what the angel in the house is, right? I know there's a lot more to it, but to sum it up for this film particularly, it's mothers are these perfect, angelic, kind, loving creatures, whereas fathers aren't exactly expected to be that. And I know that's like a reductive view. Like, you know, we've all met mothers who are not good mothers, just as we've all met fathers who are not good fathers. But I feel like this movie set up Mia Goth and Isaac. Oh God, what's his name? That's my man. I forgot it. Oscar Isaac. In their two roles, they put them against each other in more so of a maternal versus paternal treatment of children. And in this case, the child is the creature. Now, looking at the paternal aspects of it, it kind of set up Victor, like Victor Frankenstein, the mad scientist, not the monster. The monster is Frankenstein's creature, if we didn't know that. But Victor Frankenstein, it set him up as not only becoming this mirror of his father, who was very cold and harsh towards him, if not cruel, but also it set him up, it gave him this grief that drove his passion to like basically put it into death or like redeem death, because he lost his mom at a very young age, and like his mom was this perfect angel in his eyes. Basically, he lost her at a very young age, and like that was, I think he lost his father at a very young age too. And I feel like the grief from both of those deaths led to him becoming this like man who wanted to beat death. Like the grief is what led to these passions in the first place. Now, in terms of being his father's mirror, his father like punished him when he didn't get answers right on like the doctoral or anatomy quizzes that he would give him. He did the same to this monster, and I feel like this is where Victor's evilness comes into play. Like I read comments that basically said or critiqued Victor's character as being this very cartoonishly evil villain, and I also disagree with that, because I feel like you see how was he more cruel in this movie than he was in like Mary Shelley's original work? Yes, I do agree with that. He was a lot more cruel, but you also see how he developed into that, because Victor did not begin the movie, and I'm not even talking about as like a kid who lost both his parents. I'm talking about like even in his adult years, like pursuing these beat death passions he had to like create life of his own. He wasn't evil then. Was he selfish? Can it be? Yes. Can it be argued? He was very selfish. Can it be argued that it's kind of evil to also try to steal your brother's betrothed? Yes, but I digress. These things aren't what made him evil. I feel like his evilness didn't even come into play when like he created the monster. Like, even though the film might be arguing like creation is evil, his evilness came into play when he began to mirror his father. He created this monster who can only, this creature. He created this creature who at first can only say Victor. Victor. For months, that's all he could say was Victor. And Victor thought he was creating like intelligent life, basically. And instead of being like, oh my God, wow, I created life that can actually like speak, even if it's just one word, being proud of that, he hated this creature because he felt it was stupid. It was like a little dunce. Like that's where his evilness came into play. And not even then. His evilness came into play when he realized he created something that wasn't as perfect as he wanted it to be, or couldn't live up to what he wanted it to be. So instead of accepting that, like, oh my God, wow, I created life, and being proud of that, he tried to destroy it. That's what made Victor evil. And his evilness was cemented later on. And now for the maternal aspects of it, with Elizabeth's character, she was the first one. Of course, he had only met like 3 people at this point, the creature. He only met like 3 people at this point, but she was the first and only one to come to him and just sit with him and like talk with him and try to understand him outside of like being this like grotesque thing that doesn't have much intelligence, which is how his father or his creator, Victor Frankenstein, was treating him. She instead approached it with love. And I feel like that was like, motherhood versus fatherhood, kind of outdated, but also nicely portrayed trope. Like she cared for this creature without having reason to, if that makes sense. Like she didn't expect anything of him. She didn't need him to be smart. She didn't need him to be anything other than what he was, innocent at the time and curious. That's it. And she was there. No. The background changed, yes, but it relates. Now, the beginning of Victor Frankenstein's turn to evil came when he tried to kill the monster, yes, but it was cemented when he killed her. Because, and I feel like that was the part of like inaccurate adaptation that a lot of people hated, but I feel like I like the way it played out because it truly like cemented Victor as this like harsh person. Okay, in the original novel, it was like the monster killed Elizabeth and Victor's younger brother in like this fit of rage because Victor wouldn't create him a perfect bride. And while half of that is still true, the monster did kill Victor's younger brother when he like was trying to escape. It also, I feel like it fit better that Victor shot this woman and tried to frame the monster for it. And although that was an accident, not the framing, the shooting, it still drove home the fact like that Victor is becoming this cartoonishly evil villain. Like he did not start out that way. He became this. And I feel like that's what a lot of people were missing. Like they were saying he was cartoonishly evil, but he developed into that, which I feel like we watched him develop into that, which works. On to the fourth and final critique that I saw was that the forgiveness at the end of the film, yes, the background changed again, but the forgiveness at the end of the film was very unearned. And while I halfway agree with this, because I feel like, okay, the forgiveness wasn't earned in my opinion, because of pacing. And like, no diss to Guillermo del Toro, but I feel like it should have been built up more too. I feel like the monster forgave him too easily, just because Victor was on his deathbed. Like, no, if I was a monster, I still would have killed his ass, because that's what I've been trying to do. Honestly, for like the first, of course, like a whole story played out in between that, and like, they got to hear each other's stories, or actually Victor just got to hear the monster stories, because the monster wasn't even there for Victor's side of the story. But sure, like the whole movie played out in that span of 10 minutes, but it had literally been 10 minutes since he was hunting this nigga down. Like, I feel like the forgiveness wasn't earned in that sense. Although I like the idea of forgiveness, because with the forgiveness came like another part of critique that I saw mostly in comments, but I did see like one girl say she did not like how The movie ended with a Lord Byron quote, which, if you didn't know, Lord Byron is the one who like hosted the competition of ghost stories that Mary Shelley won when she wrote Frankenstein at 18 years old. Like, she won a writing competition between like her I don't know, rich friends, and it was Lord Byron's competition. And his quote was placed at the end of the movie, and someone didn't like that because like he was very much so a terrible father. Like, historically, he was a terrible father, but I feel like it was more so like just in like an honoring of like the history of the film, and I feel like the quote fit with what ended the film. So, do I like the idea of the forgiveness? Yes. Was it paced terribly, in my opinion? Also, yes. Although I feel like the Lord Byron quote at the end of the film relates very well to like the final message, or like just relates in general to like the final thing that Victor leaves Frankenstein. Sorry, Victor leaves the creature with, which is that you were given life. What other choice do you have but to live it? Even if creation in itself is cruelty, even if your parents were cruel, even if life is gonna be cruel, even if you're in pain, what other choice do you have but to continue living life? And I feel like that's a nice message. And it ties very well with like the Lord Byron quote, even with who Lord Byron was. Was he a bad dad? Yes. Did he believe in like hedonistic enjoyment of life also? Also, yes. Now, do I think God created all life? No, I'm atheist. However, viewing this through the Catholic, sorry, lens, then if God did create all life, and if life is still so cruel, what other choice do you have but to forgive your creator? Because you're still alive. And within all the cruelty, there's joy, just as there was for the creature. Despite all the bad things he faced, the cruel things he had to endure, there was some beauty in there too. Boom. I knew you was gonna want to watch this.